Before I do any of that, I'm going to sell you on Google, and this is going to be short, but I need to recontextualize the way that you think about Google because it has a really bad rap. I've heard it said often by marketers that Google is just the 21st century Yellow Pages, and nothing could be further from the truth. The thing that you have to realize is that Google is collecting data and information on people in a manner that's never been done in human history. They have 70 million demographic and psychographic profiling factors that they're using in order to catalog who you are as a person, what you do, where you go, what you're interested in, and then they use that information to market to you. Now, is this a gross violation of our personal freedoms? Probably, but we can use it to make money. So you get to decide what soapbox you want to land. But let's talk a little bit about the data and information that is accessible to Google and how it can be used to the benefit of marketers. If you're using Google search, there's a saying, I think it comes from Scott Galloway, but Google knows what you don't know. Facebook knows what you tell it. And if you spend some time meditating just on the difference between those two paradigms, when you go to Google to ask a question, that is intrinsically qualified as intent. So anytime you say, like, why do I have a headache, for instance, you can cascade that down the sales funnel, if you think about it, all the way to selling somebody Excedrin. So think about how much information that Google has on you just based off of your search practices. And most people think of Google specifically as a search engine, but it has a really broad ecosystem. So if you're using Gmail, and actually even if you're not using Gmail, if you communicate with anybody using Gmail, think about this for a minute. Google's not just cataloging your content and reading every single email you send, it's also cataloging content from people that you're sending it to. So even if somebody's not a Gmail user, Google's able to capture information on people based off of the social periphesis of being involved with those Gmail users. And they're cataloging things like what adjectives appeal to you, what verbs you're going to respond to the most. They're really trying to get to know who people are. And they're getting good at it is the scary part. YouTube is the second largest search engine on the planet. And what's really interesting about YouTube is there's something emotive about it. Google knows what inspires you, what makes you mad, what makes you happy. It knows how you engage. It knows what kind of music you're listening to. It knows when you're vulnerable. If you're using Google Maps, and chances are if you have a smartphone, you have Google Maps in your pocket, Google knows if you speed. So if it takes a half hour to get from point A to point B, and you get there in 25 minutes, Google's going to start advertising car insurance. And it's probably not that linear. But just, again, think about the power of this mechanism and I mean, the fact that it knows you better than possibly anybody else. It knows you where you go, where you work, what you do for fun, the places you go for recreation. If you're using an Android phone, Google knows who you call, who calls you, who you ignore. When you're lying, hey mom, I'm on the way, when you're not actually moving, those types of things. So again, I'm not trying to be creepy, and I realize I've probably succeeded in just freaking everybody out, and we're all going to go live off the grid somewhere in a cave. But if you're going to use Google, it's important to know how powerful it is. Google was able to tell a woman she was pregnant before she knew, based off of search. That was in 2015. This case study is from April 2015, and it's actually a Google-driven case study. I learned about this first from our dedicated Google team. Google was able to predict that a woman was pregnant before she knew, based solely off of the way that she was searching and communicating. That was 5 years ago. Think about the speed at which machine learning moves. If they can tell somebody's pregnant before they know 5 years ago, what do they possibly know now? It's amazing. So we're going to dive into the facts of Google Ads. For every dollar spent on Google Ads, businesses earn an average of $8. Now, that number is actually 11. The study was downgraded from 11 to 8 because there's something called assisted conversions. And assisted conversions are conversions that can't, strictly speaking, be tracked back to a campaign. But anecdotally, you can look at those conversions and decide, like, if we weren't running this campaign, this wouldn't have happened. But that 1 to 8, I call that the golden ratio. And you need a golden ratio for your business. For every dollar you put into marketing, how many dollars comes out? And that's your golden ratio. If you put in $1 and you get $3 out, you've got a 1 to 3 golden ratio. Google, on average, is giving out a 1 to 8 golden ratio. I don't know of another marketing mechanism that can say this with that level of consistency. For all of those out there that say, oh, I never click on the ads. 50% of people, near 50% of people, can't tell the difference between the paid ads and the organic listings. And I think a lot of that stems from the fact that Google's making a lot of adjustments. If you remember way back in the day, Google Ads used to be highlighted, the background was yellow, and it was different from all the organic listings. The little ad call out was a different color. And they're doing a lot to just sort of meld that into the remainder of the Google ecosystem. Further, 2/3 of every high commercial intent key phrase results in a paid click. So 95% of all search traffic is going to go to an organic result. I'll grant you that. But when people are ready to buy, high commercial intent means that they're ready to buy, then they start going to the paid traffic. So what that tells us is when they're learning, they go organic, and when they're ready to purchase, they go paid. So if you're not playing inside of Google's paid ecosystem, you're putting yourself at a pretty significant disadvantage. The benefits of Google Ads, I think, outweigh other marketing mechanisms on a time scale. I'm not going to tell you Google's the only thing that you need to do. What I will say is Google's the first thing that you should do. For instance, for all my SEOs out there, I started my marketing career in SEO. There's this mantra that says, oh, it takes about 90 days before you start ranking on the top half of the first page. That's a bold-faced lie for anything that's competitive. It can take 12 or 18 months at some point. Why would you start optimizing for phrases and spend that 6, 9, 12, 18 months to achieve ranking for those phrases until you've proven concept that those phrases can actually be monetized? That's the type of thing that Google can do. You get very close to immediate results out of Google. And sometimes, even though your campaign isn't successful, that doesn't mean that the information that you've gathered isn't really helpful. You might find out like, gosh, I'm not charging enough, or my conversion rate's really low, or my sales team needs to be more adept, or we're not speaking to this product the way that we should be. So before you start running, hardcore PR, content marketing, SEO, things that take time, use Google as your initial litmus test. It's expensive, for sure. There's no question, because you're paying to play. But it allows you an at-bat prior to having to do an immense amount of work. And it lets you sort of pre-qualify your endeavor. I love that Google's performance-based. A lot of media buying isn't, if you're paying. And that's not entirely true. You can pay by impression within the Google ecosystem. But more often than not, you're paying per click. And that means that you're actually paying for the delivery of value. So that sort of one-to-one combination, I'm a big fan of. You can put your finger to the pulse with Google Ads in a way that is not accessible in any other ecosystem. For 7 years, we had the highest performing real estate investment campaign on the planet. I could prove that with data. We sold that agency in June of 2019, and the reason we were able to sell it is because we could show that we had lag and lead indicators for the real estate market turning based off of Google clicks. The more people who go to Google and say, sell my house fast for cash, the stronger an indication of a distressed market. And as you watch that ebb and flow, we were a good 30 to 60 days ahead of the real estate market, which is massive. You can do the same thing in just about any market, any ecosystem. If you're running Google Ads, what you're doing is you're putting yourself at the forefront of the wave of information as to what's happening and where the spikes and the peaks and the valleys are. So if you want to get to know your market, Google Ads is the first place to be. You also actually have the information available to you. Google has something called the not provided provision, which for SEOs is a nightmare because it means, hey, we're not going to give you all the data. And we're not going to give you all the data because we don't want you to be able to reverse engineer our algorithm. Well, when you're paying for the data, they have to give it to you. So it makes you far more intelligent just in terms of what you're armed with as you go to market with your other marketing strategies. The reporting inside of Google Ads is the most reliable of any marketing mechanism. If you've run Facebook, and I'm not here to bash Facebook, I use Facebook, I'm a fan, I think it works. But if you've run Facebook for any extended period of time, you know that the conversions that Facebook reports are not the conversions that you're necessarily seeing. And it's not just Facebook. Most marketing mechanisms haven't invested what Google has invested in order to build out their infrastructure to allow for really reliable reporting. And then the nicest thing about Google, I think, is that it gives you the truest proof of concept. So we had a client that built dental offices nationwide. It takes $500,000 to $1 million to build a dental office. And the way that they would choose where in a city they opened that office is they called it driving for dollars. They would hire market researchers, and they would drive around a city, and they do some demographic studies, and then they would look at various corners, and they'd say, okay, we're going to put one here because it looks good. And maybe there's not another dentist, or there is one, but we think we can beat him, whatever. What we told them to do was start running ads, because you can spend $500,000 or $1 million opening a dental office and praying that it works, or you can run ads for an office that doesn't exist. But 10 grand in ad spend could help you beta test 3 or 4 different street corners, and you start to see which geography is working best for you. So realize that this is accessible to you and available to you. When I titled my book, I used Google. I had 30 different book titles, and I split test all 30, and I landed on the one that worked the best. It's a powerful tool if you allow it to give you the information that it has available.